to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, delighted to be joined by Hugh MacDonald and Moira Gordon, who's on my right flank. We've got lots to talk about on the Journos, and thank you to each and every one of you for your support over the course of the season. It's been absolutely fantastic. People listening on the podcast and, of course, watching on our YouTube channel. And if you want to hit that subscribe button, you can come and join the football family. And let's not forget, all of the content you've been watching this season will remain absolutely free, but we do have a new service, PLZ Premium. If you subscribe to that, you'll get additional content earlier. You'll also get discounts in our shop. And of course, we'll give you the chance to access some of the events we'll be taking across the country. So, lots to look forward to. Before we get into the meat and bones of the end of the Scottish Premiership season, which is looming ever closer, we're going to talk about some of the results from last night, and as well as some of the news items that have come up. I thought we'd give a little bit of a tribute to Jack McGinn, 92 years of age, sadly passed away, the former Celtic chairman and Scottish FA president.
Yeah, a guy that gave so much of his time and his life to football. A guy that survived in the wild west of Scottish football at the time, being very, I would say, very conciliatory, amicable. He was a gentleman, Jack. You know, there's no doubt about that. But he was also a guy that had a sharp mind as well, and knew where he thought Scottish football should go, and what the problems of Scottish football were and still are. But he fought the good fight, and he will be missed. I don't think there'll be many in football that would have anything ill to say about Jack McGinn.
Yeah, and over and above that, I mean, a lot of people will look at that troubled period in Celtic's history when eventually Ferguson McCann comes in, but I thought it was a nice tribute from Peter Lawwell, just saying, you know, he was a true Celtic man. He had the club's best interests at heart, and that transition over to Fergus is one of those key areas.
That's right. You serve at any board level. There'll always be people that criticise elements of what you've done or decisions you made. But I don't think anybody who ever knew him or spoke to him would ever doubt his credentials as a true Celtic man who wanted the best for the club, and made sure that it was part of it that passed on to somebody and to a new era, and was able to be revitalised. So, as I say, I don't think anybody could ever doubt that he cared about the club passionately. And over and above that, he gave us grandsons that play football and, have delighted us for years as well. So
that's a more important point.
It is indeed. Well. It's for a certain generation.
Yeah, thank God he had a lot of kids, by the way, Jack. But a great football man, and of course his contribution to the SFA as well. I'm almost certain people will look back with great fondness when eventually the funeral comes around. And from everybody on the Journos, our thoughts and prayers with his friends and family at this difficult time. Football was his love, football's our love, and we love to see Scottish people doing well slightly further afield. Lewis Ferguson, I mean, it's an incredible situation, Moira. We're actually looking at three Scottish people who could be actually at the forefront of major honours in Italy.
It's astonishing. You think about, I was speaking to somebody just the other day and we were talking about growing up watching the Italia League and, Channel 4, just getting that buzz for it. It always seems so exotic and so, something that was so far removed from where we were as a country, a football country. And you look at it now and, these next generation that are there, basically not just surviving in it or, exampling it, they're absolutely thriving it, they're bossing it. And it's like to be lifting trophies, this Scot that, they are representing our nation and himself, his family, and lifting a trophy. You've got to get a buzz from that. Anybody that's a football fan in Scotland, you want to see Scots abroad doing well, and it's a brilliant story.
Yeah, it is indeed. And in fact, you mentioned it. I'm glad you mentioned the fact that we all used to. There was only 4 channels at the time, just for the benefit of some people who are under the age of 40. We watched Channel 4. James Richardson actually made it okay to sit with a Knickerbocker glory and a coffee by an Italian restaurant. We really should do that, Hugh, just to pay tribute to these guys.
You're all talking about as your child. That was my middle age, And I go back to Italian football. I really go back to it. The first sort of memories of it are certainly Dennis Law and Jimmy Greaves going over there. That's how long ago I go back. George Charles as well, of course, Juventus. But the one thing I always remember watching AC Milan at Celtic, that would be 68, I think, because I think they won the cup in 69.
Yes.
So it would be the winter of 68, and Gianni Rivera was playing. And there was just he was just brilliant. There was just a sheer allure, which actually has never gone away with AC Milan. I always think, in my life in journalism, I always think AC Milan probably the classiest club I've ever dealt with in terms of, you know, being able to, you know, their PR and the way they dealt with you as well. But anyway, go back to Lewis. The thing I love about Lewis is that Billy Gilmour was a gilded child, good on him, and looked at it. McTominay was at Manchester United since he was an embryo. But Lewis has come through the hard way. Lewis has been dumped by a club. He was, you know, he was out at Hamilton Accies doing his doggies at Hamilton Accies, wondering if will I ever make it, going to the gym in the morning, and you say to yourself, that really resonates with me, because you say to yourself, imagine the dreams that he would have at Hamilton Accies, maybe just to try and make a career out of the game. And now he's a Coppa d'Italia winning captain. He's now on the verge of, I mean, if Bologna wasn't good enough, and by goodness it is good enough, he's now on the verge. I mean, who's going to be looking at him now?
Yeah.
Inter, AC, Juve.
There's lots of clubs interested in him.
I think that's the story with Lewis. Adversity and overcoming it.
Yeah.
And patience, because again, he could have gone elsewhere, but he chose to go to Hamilton to do it slow and steady, and you know. And again, growing up in the family he grew up in, there was a lot of pressure there for him to deliver as well, and he's handled all of it. Whether it's adversity, pressure, he's had that patience that other people haven't when they're chasing something, and he believed it. There was a quiet confidence without it being in your face or an arrogance or thinking he'd already made it before he had. And I think he deserves every bit of success he's getting.
His dad once told me that you know, when he was at school and that, he says Lewis would go up early and his dad would take him down to the gym before the school run. So Lewis was doing his gym, getting into the car and then going, and his dad says, he was one of these guys that actually loved being fit, wanted to be fit all the time. And there was a wry chuckle from Derek at that, you know, the way that Lewis had dedicated himself. And at the time, dedicating yourself, and there was no, I mean, I think it's not easy to dedicate yourself, but if you're at Manchester United or Chelsea, you say, well, you know, I've got it, so let's keep it. But if you're scuffling about, you know, looking for bigger clubs, you know, there might be the element. I always remember Andy Robertson saying in an interview, I interviewed him in Qatar, and people said he was talking about his lifestyle now, no drinking and all that. He says, it's really easy not to drink and to keep fit. If you're at Liverpool, everybody's on top of you, getting measured, and you know, and you've made it, and you know what the rewards are. He says, it was more difficult when I was at Queen's Park, when my mates were saying, why don't you come out for a couple of pints? No, it's Tuesday. Oh, come on, you're playing for Queen's Park. You're 3 days away from a game. You can have a couple of pints. He says, that's when it's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to have that commitment, that long-term view that maybe something's going to come from the regime that you put in place. Listen, Bologna haven't won a trophy since 1974, so that's an indication of the enormity of it all. And if you're talking about two Scottish players who could be involved in the wonderful history of Napoli, Maradona was a legend. They then had to wait decades before they eventually won Serie A again. But now, if they can defeat Parma and Cagliari, they'll be champions. There is a permutation that if somehow Inter beat Lazio and Como and they end up in level points, there'll be a playoff between the two of them, which I think is a fantastic idea.
I like it. It's brilliant. Yeah, I do.
But these two boys, Billy Gilmour and McTominay's a sensation for them.
Absolutely. And it's the fact that they're being received so well over there. It's not just us cheerleading from Scotland and thinking they're brilliant. They're absolute gods there already. You know, the number 8 McTominay shirts selling out, you know, Gilmour shirts. People appreciate what they're bringing to it. And to hear people from other countries not just saying that Scots are plucky or hard-working or, you know, we've got great fans, they're actually saying, you know, you've got good footballers here.
Yeah.
These are good guys that are integral to our success, and I think that's something to be really proud of.
I think the manager deserves a lot of credit because, quite simply, before everybody's talking about the McTominay dilemma, he's been at a club where, quite simply, I don't think they knew where to play him. He was like a bit part player, credibility, or even that point of he's a regular starter wasn't considered. McTominay was almost every time he took to the field in a United shirt having to prove himself.
Absolutely.
Now he's got a manager who said, listen, this is where you're going to play, this is your role, you're the number 8 and you're starting.
Yeah, and Conte is like, one thing you can say about Conte is Conte's focus. Conte makes decisions and doesn't look back. I mean, people forget about Napoli. They lost Cava this year.
Yeah.
You know, he's a favourite to win a Champions League. You know, the Georgian will not. I like calling him Cava because I don't want to get through. You're very good at his name, aren't you? Cava, Shrella, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
you're good at that.
I'll try it for you before.
Yeah, that's
we
the
get
difference
into
between
this
a
program.
written journalist and a
broadcaster.
yeah, the written ones get picked up, it's easier.
I have to tell you, by the way, that is the one thing that you do. You know, people say, how do you pronounce these things? You say, you go and ask somebody from that area, and you make sure you've got the right pronunciation.
But Conte's been central to everything. On the thing, I was in. It was this time last year. I was in Naples, and that was almost a year after they'd won the Scudetto for the first time since the Maradona year, and it's mental. I mean, you know how people say, "Oh, they'll be a hero." McTominay, you don't get the. You're talking about. He'll be on murals. He'll be years to come. There'll be graffiti and murals and cutouts. See, if you walk through Naples, the Scudetto winning team were up in the Via dei Tribunali, which is through the old town. It's there was bunting up everywhere. A year on, you would walk into an ice cream shop and there'd be a cardboard cutout of whoever, Osimhen or however. Maradona. You'd walk into a 5-star hotel and incongruously there'd be a cutout of Maradona in the corner, like walking into the Hilton in London and going, why is Harry Kane? It's like, it's hard to. I think in all my travels, I think Naples is the greatest one-team football city I've been in.
Yeah. Well, listen, they're on the verge of a little bit of history as well, these two Scots, and we wish them the very best of luck. Just one little footnote to Italian football before we start to get into the meat and bones of Scottish football and some of the movements, relegation, manager changes, the lot. Sampdoria. I remember, I think Viekabod, do you remember that?
Oh,
name?
yes, the big centre half, Souness.
And then you look at Trevor Francis, who also played there.
Lombardo.
Attilio Lombardo ended up at Crystal Palace.
Baldi Lombardo.
But it's amazing they're relegated to Serie C.
Absolutely.
You've been in that stadium?
Yes.
It's phenomenal.
And the funny thing about it is what is tragedy for them, because of Italian football, the Genoa fans will be doubled over in laughter for the next forevermore.
Yeah.
They're great rivals, and one time the team that sort of owned the city is now in Serie C. It's an interesting wee thing with the Lewis Ferguson thing, because I think Souness won a Coppa Italia with Sampdoria. He wasn't a captain, but I think he won that. So it was so unusual for a top class player, Scott, to be in Italy. But Sampdoria, as you know and I know, has got that great tradition in Italian football. Even the shirt was iconic, the way the shirt was and the way the players played with it. And it just shows you in football. Football is brutal, and bad decisions, continuing bad decisions, lead to sport and perdition. And that Serie C is just unbelievable for them.
I know you didn't try to do it, but subconsciously, you've just led me into that nice little link, which is St Johnstone, because out of all the results from Wednesday night's fixtures, and we had our reporters right across all the games because of the implications for everyone. Suddenly Hearts 2, St Johnstone 1, and the game that I was up at Dens Park, a late penalty relegated St Johnstone. Ross County now live to fight another day with Dundee for this playoff. But St Johnstone, 16 years in the top flight is no mean feat, and when you look at the silverware that they've won, to see them get relegated, it's a sad day for them.
It was really sad. I was actually at that game, and it was. The fans were brilliant, to be honest with you. I know that St Johnstone fans get a lot of sticker. There's not, people to say there's not enough of them. But the fans that were at Tynecastle, they sang, they backed their team all the way through it, and it was kind of heartbreaking seeing the own goal being scored, and them still trying to rally around a team that has so many individual errors and defensive mistakes had cost them this season. They still rallied around them. They got to the end of the match, and they still thought there was hope. And then there was the late call. And you could just see them deflate. You know, the call had come through that there'd been the penalty scored up at Danes Park. They were down, and it was heartbreaking for them because they've punched above their weight for so many years. You know, I mean, you think about it, they've been in Europe, they've been finishing up the top half of the league more times than they should have for their budget.
Won the Scottish Cup
won the Scottish Cup, the League Cup. You know, everything that they've done in that time, they should never have been anywhere close to it with the budget that they've had compared to the other teams in the top flight. So I think to stay up in the top flight for 16 years was an achievement, and I feel quite sorry for them going down. But as I say, they went down with a wee bit, especially their fans, with dignity last night because they supported them right to the end.
Yeah, the key word here, which is missing, which is basically why they find themselves in this predicament, is over that period where they have managed to win silver, where there's been stability, there's been a leader at the heart of the club who had a vision and was able to control it. That was Jeff Brown. I think to a lesser extent, his son, probably not in the same mould, if I'm looking at it, because I'm trying to get that line in the sand, Hugh, where you say to yourself, well, what prompted St Johnstone's demise? And with that in mind, you have to look and say to yourself, well, decisions that are made that take them down a road. And I thought the hiring of Craig Levein was the beginning of the end, because the football they played was dire. And when you look at him, he started off that season with 1 win, 5 defeats and a draw. And people were looking at the team and thinking, they're not even playing good football. And the way he was hired, just suddenly sitting in the stand, the whole thing just, it took St Johnstone down a road which made it very difficult for Simo Valakari to try and rescue it. And I think he deserves the chance to get them out of that championship.
Yeah, two things. I mean, first of all is, how did it get like this? And it got like this because they stopped being good at what got them Scottish Cups and League Cups and kept them in the division. And that was basically very strong decision making. Very good recruitment, and very good recruitment of managers as well.
Tommy Wright.
Callum Davidson was a terrific recruit. I mean, Callum Davidson now, like all managers' reputation is a bit dented and damaged because of what happened at St Johnstone latterly in Queen's Park didn't work out either. We got to remember, what he did. He won 2 cups in a season, and that's. It's unprecedented in modern times.
Yeah, for a club like St Johnstone.
Yeah, unprecedented. So what made them really good was decisions, and what made them really bad was decisions, because the decisions started going poorly. And the biggest decisions that went poorly were recruitment. And it was recruitment of managers, and it was recruitment of players. It got to a stage at one point where you thought, I watched St Johnstone early in the season, and it didn't take Pep Guardiola to look at it and say, this is a team in trouble.
Yeah.
And I've watched them of late. I went up and watched them in the Scottish Cup against Hamilton, and I watched them in another game. I think it was against Celtic. And you could see where, Valakari was trying to go. He's bringing, I think he was unlucky with injuries to people like Svedberg, etc. But you could see where he was wanting to go. So I think my second point is, I think he'll get the chance to get out of it. I think they'll go into that division, and you look at that division and what's left in it, it's always tough, but it's a division where they'll be looking to get out. I think, Dunfermline, they'll be looking for a much better season next season with a bit of input. But, I think he'll go in, and that'll be his task, get them back up at first attempt, which is not going to be easy, but is possible given what the championship will be next year.
And they do get a parachute payment as well, which always helps them.
They're going to need, because they need to recruit. I think they've got so many, about 2/3, 3/4 of their squad are out of contracts. So, at the end of the day, Valakari will be getting judged not on somebody else's signings the one thing I will say about the beginning of the season, they brought in Mackenzie Kirk, and he's been really good for them. Yeah. But other than that, when you look at the recruitment, it's all going to be Simo's. He's going to be judged on who comes in, and he's also going to have to buy in players that suit Championship rather than suit the Premiership.
That'll be the interesting thing for me. I think that's a crucial thing, because you see the way he plays, and he kind of modified it as the season went on, because he started playing out for the back, and then he saw, wait a minute, because we're giving teams a goal start, and he has modified. He's been a bit more pragmatic, so it'll be interesting to see how he attempts the sort of they hear him scare him in the Championship.
Yeah, with that in mind, I'm going to touch on Hearts because it links up to Kilmarnock. Now, we now know, Moira, that Derek McInnes is not going to be in the dugout for Kilmarnock in that game against Hearts because it's unbelievably difficult. And I think he might have got pelters from the Killie fans on that point. Derek McInnes is Hearts manager. I mean, I looked at the whole situation. I was actually looking at his career and then saying, right, is this a good move for him? Is this a good move for Hearts? And the calibre of Derek, I like him. He's been in here on more than a few occasions, and I like him as a person and as a manager. He won promotion with St Johnstone. He told me about the nightmare. They kept Bristol City in the league, but he told me about the nightmare that unfolded after it. Yeah. They won the League Cup under him in possibly the worst League Cup final I've ever seen in my life against Inverness. But I think of all of his achievements, I thought he should have won the league in 2015-16 against Ronnie Dyer Celtic. They were hopeless, Celtic.
I think that was where it started going wrong at Aberdeen, because again, Aberdeen fans, I think there's a bit of revisionism in there as well, because when he first went in, the football was decent. He brought guys like Niall McGinn and Johnny Hayes and guys like that to Scottish football and had them playing in a way that it was quite a swashbuckling team. You know, I mean, it wasn't like the big flair party going, but it was entertaining football.
Organised, though. He's like that.
He'll always have it organised first, but again, we see with like St Johnstone, if you don't do that in top leagues, you tend to be in trouble. So he gets them organised, but he still wants a bit of football played or a bit of it's high press or get that the ball upfield. So I think sometimes people misportray him or the style he plays players, but I think a lot of that comes from that season at Aberdeen, where Aberdeen fans thought they should be winning more. They thought with Rangers not in the mix that they should be in there pushing Celtic harder, and I think they found it hard to swallow the fact, especially that Ronnie Dyer season, that they didn't push over the line. I think that then affected their overall memories or vision of Derek and Tony Docherty at the time,
Yeah.
So.
Am I being unkind on that? I mean, I did say to Tony Docherty, who was in here a good few months ago, and he said we should have won the league. He actually looks and concedes and says, we should have won the league. Didn't do it. There was a real opportunity then. And then, of course, listen, he had the big chance then to join Rangers, but I think Stuart Milne talked him right out of it. When he was going to become the Rangers manager. So that train left the station.
Yeah, I think as well as, you can argue about the Ronnie Dyer winning the league, but, I think what got Aberdeen fans as well as Ross County and Inverness, Caledonian Thistle were winning cups and Aberdeen weren't.
Yes.
And I think, I think the Aberdeen fans are always traduced because people say, they always want to be like Alec Ferguson, and they don't. If you talk to an Aberdeen fan, they're pretty fair. They just say, just like to be Ross County and, go up get a cup, or Inverness Caledonian Thistle and get a cup at Hampden. I mean, they're not daft. Michael Grant is, but the rest of them are not daft.
Mark Walker.
Mark Walker as well, yeah. That is why I think it really soured Aberdeen for him. I think the last 10 days haven't been good on either Derek or Hearts. I think the whole thing's been handled really poorly. I don't think he should have gone on Sky or gone nowhere near it. I know he's got to manage a club and all that, but he doesn't have to be a pundit in the midst of this. I think he should have made his excuses and left, kept the verbiage down, which has been great for us, but I'm talking about him.
His advisors.
Just say, listen, don't go, because this is going to be a very difficult situation and it's going to culminate in a meeting between your employers and your future employers. Here's a shock. I'm slightly surprised they went to Hearts.
Why?
Because I think it is a club that has not been well run at the moment, doesn't have a strategy, has jumps about, has got the upside. It's the third. I'm comfortable saying it's the third biggest team in Scotland in many ways. But I think where he was at Kilmarnock, he had an owner that had a very good relationship with him, had given him a job when he wasn't getting many jobs, given him. You look at the Kilmarnock accounts, given him a more than decent salary, helped him out in budget, and I can see the lure of Hearts. But Hearts, I think, is. I think Hearts is not quite a basket case, but What's Hearts' strategy at the moment?
Well,
I mean, why are they getting Derek McInnes?
Do you think Derek, though, hasn't asked them that and made sure? I think Derek's a strong enough. If you were bringing in another young manager, I think Derek's the sort of guy that can go in there and say, no, we need to have this, we need to sit down. He did that at Aberdeen. He got them to... Aberdeen weren't in a brilliant place necessarily when he went there either, and he helped steady that and get them back on.
But that suggests that Hearts are throwing out strategy, because Hearts' strategy was everything was going to be Johnstone analytics, everything was going to be done with director of football, then there wasn't going to be a manager, it was going to be head coach and he coaches the players. Presumably, if you bring in a McInnes, and I've got no insight to this, that plan's out the window.
Yeah, but the other thing about it as well is I think you're right. I think the strategy suddenly, if not the fact that they didn't, it's not the fact they didn't have a strategy. I think there were too many elements coming in to muddy the waters. You know, Jamestown analytics, and everybody's thinking, oh, there's some kind of computer program here that's going to make this mob brilliant. They're going to be bringing in players who've got 45 crosses and 70% of them are headed in by a striker that they've spotted who'll convert these goals. So, and again, the clout, you know, it kind of muddied the waters because you suddenly look at Brighton, you think, oh, Hearts will be the new Brighton. That's not the case. What you had with Stevie Naismith, they didn't like him, they wanted him out. This is a group of fans who also wanted Robbie Neilson out the second time of asking as well. They're a hard lot to please, by the way, and I've lived in that city and know exactly the way their mind works. And I've heard some journalists, you know, talking about they want a Hearts side, you know, hard to beat, physical. What a lot of crap. I mean, what you want is a Hearts side that are entertaining to literally galvanise 16,000 fans who are fanatical in a fabulous stadium. And I think you're right, Moira, on that point. I think it needs a strong manager to come in and say, listen, this is the way the structure's going to go. I will embrace the Jamestown analytics on certain players, but it's my call. And I think he's got to do that.
Well, that's completely against everything that they said at the beginning of the season.
But the problem is they've sacked a manager. They sacked the one before it as well, and the one before that. And eventually you get to the situation, you say, well, we need an identity. And I think because of his experience, Hugh, he's going to be able to come in and say...
But my point is, why? See, if you wanted McInnes and you want a McInnes type of manager, why don't you get him when you sacked Naismith? Because the same thing was available.
Well, again, but what happens is somebody comes in with a blueprint and says, this is the light, the way, the truth, and you all buy into it.
That's it. And also, I mean, I might be, but then you're looking at that point thinking, have we got a better, cheaper option that we're not having to pay compensation, and now there may be backs to the walls a bit more and thinking, well, actually, compensation is not such a bad idea after all.
But backs against the wall is a classic, that's what it was.
Yeah.
The reason Crouchley's away is they got the fear.
Yeah,
they got the fear. They said, do you know what? Not only being in the bottom six, we could go down.
Do you know what the fear is as well? See, once you see empty seats.
Yeah. That's it. Season ticket sales.
As soon as and that week, a couple of weeks ago, one of the people at the club said to me, seeing the hospitality, people are not coming. They are showing their displeasure at what's gone on, and while, you know, at times over the last 5 or 6 years, they have praised Anne Budge and what she's trying to do, and again a woman who wants to better Hearts, and you've got James Anderson still in the background as that billionaire who'll help them, but the structure of it, I think, with the foundation of Hearts in there as well, and they're in and they have a major say at times. I think the whole thing has allowed them to go off track and start saying, oh, well, we'll go this way, or we'll go that way, and there's been no definitive. This, I think, will be a chance, as Moira highlighted, the qualities of this man, he's more experienced to say, we're going to do it my way, and I'll embrace the Jamestown analytics. I'm delighted he's going to put in £9.86 million. That will give us a chance to embrace what he's all about and the style that he likes in a player. But ultimately, Derek will turn around and go, by the way, despite the stats, I've had a wee look at him. He's not for us.
I know that's where the problem is.
Derek's very good on the whole at judging people.
I think that's the problem.
So when it comes to the analytics will come forward, and if they present, there's 5 players, he'll go and see which one has the character, and he knows that, as you say, playing at Tynecastle or being a Hearts player, and there's a few of them in there who have been good players elsewhere but come in at Hearts, and Hearts is too big a club, it's too intense for them.
Yes.
Whereas Derek is the sort of guy that'll go, right, I'll meet these 5 guys. he's not got the bottle for it, he's not got that heart, he's brilliant at delivering crosses, he's got the pace I want, but this one's got the character that can cope with what's coming at them. And I think that's fundamental. That club, out with the Old Firm, there's no other club in Scotland that needs that type of character.
I think that's where the problem starts, because it's like you've got one toe in, you're not fully, people say, you're saying he's embracing analytics. He'll embrace it up until the point where he shoves it away.
But that's the same with scouts with that now. It's just the analytics kind of cuts out all the long miles, because at the moment you get scouts that will present you with, there's 9 forwards you want, that you said you want one that had pace, this is 9 forwards. And the manager's still going to have to look at videotapes or go out and look at them. This is what they're doing, they're just cutting it down to the 5 or 9 quicker through analytics, and then he'll still have scouts or himself look at it. It's kind of just, I don't think it's reinventing the wheel, really.
No, you're right.
But it's actually just speeding up the process or cutting out a bit more of the...
I think it's a veto thing, though.
Yeah, but Stephen Robinson came in a couple of weeks ago to the studio, and he said, I said, what about all this Jamestown analytics and people who give you analytics? He said, listen, we do embrace it as managers. We do embrace the data. He said, but surely you go and look at a player. Surely your eye is still that last, check on whether you're going to sign a player. And he said exactly what you said, Moira, which is, I need to see him, and I need to check the character of the player. I need to know his background. I need to know if I think he can cut it. And then he said, and by the way, he said, we do look at the data. He said, but I phone my scout. He says, I've only got one. And he goes and he checks them, and he phones me and said, he's the one for you, he's not, and he's brilliant. He says, and it's still that one man, I think his name was Martin, and he says, Martin goes out, and then I'll phone him, and then I'll go and look at him. Yeah. And I think Derek will look and say to himself, I just think now what it needs is that stability for Hearts to say, right, we're going to embrace it. Yes, there may be bumps in the road, Hugh, which every manager does have when they turn around and say, listen, I'm not. I know you've suggested this player because of this set of data, but I'm the manager. I'll never die by it.
This is the crucial thing, though. This is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but Stevie Naismith or Neil Critchley couldn't say that. I don't think they had strength of character.
Well, it's not that. I don't think it's like everything. If you say they're two different models, Peter. If you go on analytics, and analytics is your priority, you've got a case like Liverpool, where Slot and Klopp before them didn't have veto over players. They didn't say, well, I've looked at the analytics and I actually want number 5. They might get it under the discussion if they make a stronger case, but they didn't have the veto. They would say, no, the transfer committee has decided that Jurgen Klopp, we're actually going for number 1. He says, number 3. And he says, well, we don't care. You've had your vote, we're going for number 1. This is at Liverpool.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening at Hearts. I genuinely don't know. And if that means it's a change...
But that means it's a change.
Yeah. Well, it is a change.
But
it's a change that they've hired McInnes in the first place.
That's what I'm saying. They've thrown out a strategy.
Yeah.
After 8 months? That's why I say it's a badly run club. Because if you have a strategy, that is your strategy.
Yeah, no, but the thing is, Hugh, like human beings in normal life, I mean, we have a strategy here at PLZ, and I say, listen, 99 times out of 100, I might actually just turn and go, that hasn't worked, and I have to change, and I have to adapt, and I have to look and say, well, we've got these 9 or 10 programmes, or we've got these 9 or 10 pundits, or we've got this staff. You change and you make decisions. And I think the one thing is Derek has that experience and ability to say, listen, this is the way we're going to do it. I am going to embrace the analytics, but it's not going to be the ultimate doctrine that determines what happens.
The computer isn't the manager. I'm still the manager.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't disagree that there's problems at the club. I think there is. But I think you can have a badly run club, but an even worse run club would be one that didn't realise it was a badly run and didn't change its strategy.
Yeah, but you honestly see now, right, this is my point, I have no insight into it. You actually see Tony Bloom, whose whole life is run with figures, right? Whole life. I'm not talking about football. Who's made billions out of figures, right? And has put 10 million into Hearts, is going to sit down and you say, do you know what? And the way he'll look at it, Derek McInnes' hunch over a right back is better than my computer.
But the computer will already have given them the three anyway, so it's not like Derek McInnes is saying, I don't like any of the ones that the computer's thrown at me, I'm going to go out and get somebody completely different. He'll pick from the ones that the computer...
But that's what Klopp used to do, and Klopp would be overruled.
Yeah, but you're talking about
this isn't Liverpool and it
That's
isn't
what I'm saying. But it's the same thing, it's the same principle.
But you're talking about it as if it is set in stone, Hugh. It's not. It's basically a situation where Tony Bloom is going to come in and offer expertise, which I think Hearts, as a club, only have to look at his record and say, right, we want to embrace that part of it. We've made mistakes with 2-3 managers. Now we've got to get to a situation where we're going to go with someone with experience who knows Scottish football, who's got something else to offer as well. And what you do is you get a blend of both. Yeah. And you get that, you try and get that happy medium. The bit that you're talking about is if they go against it, if it doesn't work out, then it's another manager who gets sacked.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. But I think the two imperatives don't mesh. Well, they really don't. Well, Tony Bloom is not going to sit and continually have his analytical analysis overridden by intangibles like character, gut feeling. I've seen the player. He just isn't, because that, you know how you know that? Because that is how he's built his life.
Well, it's not going to be overridden, because the one that Derek will be picking from is 3 of the ones that his analytics.
But it might not. It might not be.
No, it might not. But I think the way it is that it's going to be, they'll table players. There might be the odd one that comes in that isn't, but I think the majority of them will be, this is what the analytics are. There's your 2 or 3 that fit all the criteria you want, or 5 out of the 6 criteria you want. Which one do you like best? And Derek will say, tell you what, I'll speak to somebody about that, or I know somebody used to work with him at X club and he was disruptive in the dressing room, or he actually disappears when it's a tough game. So he'll go and still chat with all his contacts and his scouts, and he'll do his own due diligence, but it'll be on ones that the computer's already thrown up. It's not that the computer's got these 3 or 4 and Derek's away out to pick out another 5 or 6 from somewhere else.
But Bajinki might not want to do that at times.
I don't think he'll complain about it too much, because at the end of the day, as I say, that's kind of what people do, just by word of mouth, rather than a computer throwing you those 3 or 4.
I don't think it's tablets of stone.
No,
I think it is for Bloom. I think it is for Bloom.
Well, that is something we're about to find out. But an interesting point that I will put to him, Derek McInnes, is you're quite strongly saying it's almost this kind of rigid man who will not deviate from what he believes is a blueprint, which is in his mind ultra successful, and if you don't accept it, then I'm not going to be happy with you. He has a stake in the club. He doesn't have the overriding one that is the definitive, but what he does have is a chance to have, he won't be in the boardroom, by the way, it's one of his representatives, and he'll go in there and say, look, we'd like to bring this to the table which we think will help you as a manager. All the qualities that you have, great, but here's something we think will enhance your ability to gain success. And the good thing about it from Derek McInnes' point of view, in contrast to maybe Stevie Naismith, who was inexperienced, and Neil Critchley, who was wrong man for job, he might have something that he can bring to the table. Again, it's all waiting to see.
I just think I think it's really intriguing. I think you're right on. What will Tony Bloom's huge influence people will be really overriding. But I just go back to Brentford, and I always remember talking to Warburton and Davy Weir. And Warburton and Davy Weir were saying, like, that's very similar. I can't even remember Brentford. I think the guy's name was that owned Brentford. And they said, listen, it wasn't about gut feelings. It wasn't about going and watching a player. It wasn't about character. If you had any of those conversations with this guy who, very like Bloom, made all his money out of gambling, made all his money out of figures and analytics, he just was not interested. So Warburton and Davy Weir just went, right, we had to walk.
Yeah.
For Derek, it's going to be a tough one, because he is going to have to please several different masters in terms that every manager that goes into Hearts, because the foundation contributes money, every fan who contributes even a tenner a month thinks that they have a right to have an opinion, and they have an opinion, But you can't please every single one of them. How many times do we're sitting around this table and 3 of us aren't agreeing on something?
But they're going to have a vote coming up.
Yeah.
At the end of the month, they will
But
vote
even
on
within,
Tony Bloom's investment.
but even within the foundation, there's so many disparate types of opinions and views. So you've got all them to keep happy. The board are trying to keep them happy. Derek's going to have to try and keep them happy. The board happy. Tony Bloom happy. And he's a wily. He's long enough in the tooth that I'm sure if MD can, he can manage that. But it's not going to be an easy go in and just cruise along. It's going to be a...
What do you think he'll be called? Manager or head coach?
They'll probably call it head coach, because I think all of the ones,
I think they will as well.
And Stephen Naismith were head coach. Well, he was eventually head coach after, but all of them were,
I don't mean to dismiss out of hand, because I know you're going to come back with what I call a Stan Wawrinka backhand on me here, but from Derek's point of view, there's going to be a chain of command and a structure that they're going to slowly but surely will emerge. It will emerge at Hearts, but right now he'll be looking and saying to himself, listen, I've got to steady this club, try and get them into a style of football that wins games, try and be above Hibs, try and get silverware. And that's what he'll be wanting. And I think, since Aberdeen, no disrespect to Kilmarnock, I certainly won't be dissing them even if I'd played for them, but no disrespect to Kilmarnock, I think he stands a really good chance of taking a few scalps along the way and changing Hearts' mindset, which I think, like you, at times has been a rudderless ship. So we will see. And then it brings me nicely on to another boy who would give his right arm to be the manager of Rangers, but it looks as if right now he's had an emotional farewell at Ibrox. They've been singing his name. They've lived off the great Barry Ferguson as a player, but he's not going to be the manager. And suddenly we've got another group coming in the 49ers, or a group of investors that will look at Rangers and say, right, we need to find the right man. And suddenly everybody's jumping on Davide Ancelotti. Now, with all due respect, I think a number of people are saying, listen, it's not Carlo Ancelotti, and he's got no CV that suddenly says I've had success here, 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 and here. So there's another conundrum suddenly at another club in Scotland. If he indeed is the man, I think there's a long way to go and a few twists and turns before you start branding the Ancelotti name about.
What I've heard is on the list, and he's been spoken to informally, is what I've heard. That again is hugely interesting, because it goes down the McInnes route again, because Hearts have gone from the head coach sort of let's not weigh in the Scottish factor. And I saw Barry's piece the other day, and even you said that what they've done is they changed the weighting and they put that as a criteria. And then Derek became one of the prime candidates. So it's really interesting what the criteria are going to be, because if you look at the leading names and you would think the leading names is Steven Gerrard and Davide Ancelotti. You go, what? What question are you asking? If those are the answers.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so miles apart.
Yes.
I mean, so what questions are... But we know from what this group are about and who's behind them, that I think their criterion will be very, very focused. And I think it's going to be really intriguing who they go for. Are they going to see, like they do in most American brands or franchises, that the sporting director is going to be the main man?
Yes.
And they're going to slot in coaches, which is really the sensible way to do it.
Yeah. And for the first time, this club, if this whole takeover goes through and they get the 51%, for the first time in a long while, I don't think they will in any way be sidetracked by opinions of tradition, anything like that. I think it suddenly will become a business plan and a business strategy where they say, thank you very much, we know you've been at Rangers for 50 years, thank you, but no, this is what we're doing and this is the way we're doing it. If you don't like it, you run it.
The thing is, that's dangerous. It's like, if it works and you're a good businessman, then fans will still keep coming and they'll buy into it because they're getting silverware. If it doesn't, you see how quickly it disconnects. Look at the Man United situation. If it's not successful, people soon resent, and the fact that they're not having a voice, their traditions aren't being adhered to. nobody wants to go along and think they've lost game after game, but you've also lost your club, or what made it important, or what gave it the heart or the tradition.
But it hasn't worked since
No, it hasn't, but that's what I'm saying.
The success rate's not been great,
but
and it's been a boardroom full of disruption.
No, absolutely, but that's what I'm saying. I think just because it suddenly becomes a business doesn't mean that it's success either, because you could then still be losing, but also losing fans and losing the connection, and that connection is the bit that's vital to every football club. You know,
the biggest problem they have, though, Moira, is the fact that they, by getting a new mindset, a business group who are coming in to run it as a business, the business has to be successful. And what they will find out quickly is the Rangers fans will say, we want it this year coming. Yeah. We want a big transformation. Some fans who I think are maybe not completely clued up on what's going to happen are thinking, it's got to be immediate. We want big millions spent. That's not going to happen. It's going to be a gradual evolution.
Yeah, and there'll be real solid business strategies sent down there. And now this club again will have looked at figures, and they've looked at their own models and how they can transfer their models in it. What they don't know, and this sounds daft because the 49ers are a big brand. The pressures that are on a Rangers manager / head coach are enormous, and they're beyond things in the English Premier League. And people will shout, well, how can they be beyond the pressures of the English Premier League? I say because managers who've worked in the English Premier League and have worked in Scotland have told me that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was remember the first time I met Gordon Strachan at Celtic Park. I think it was his second game at Celtic Park. Gordon Strachan, one of the greatest Scottish football players ever, so we knew the landscape. Already a hugely experienced manager, with pressure, saved Coventry from relegation, took Southampton to an FA Cup final, a guy that with really good pedigree and knew the pressures. I said to him, how are you finding it? He says, week 2, he says, man, it's absolutely bonkers. He says, this is the 6th press conference I'm going to, and we're playing Ross County tomorrow. Yeah. He'd just been interviewed by the written press, the Sunday press, sponsors press, Sky, and now was going to broadcast. He says it's crazy, the pressures. And it's why, Gordon, I would imagine, 3 or 4 seasons and he left. Yeah. So you can say to the 49ers, you know what, Davide Ancelotti is the best, we've sourced this, we've done others, he's the best prospective head coach in Europe, right? Say you came up with that thing. But then you place him into Ibrox. And you go out to the Champions League and you lose the first game against Celtic. And who's is burning down?
And he stands there and says, it's just 3 points, don't worry about it, we'll get it back next week. Not understand that it's not just 3 points,
That was Clement's problem, because Clement was coming from an area where if you lose a game, you lose a game. If you lose a game in Scotland, you saw with Brendan Rodgers. Brendan Rodgers is on track for a treble. Right, what is that, his second treble? No, they lost the League Cup last year, they didn't get the League Cup. So he's on track for his 5th successive domestic trophy, and they lose at St Johnstone in basically a no-mark game. And it's pelters for a week. Is he the right man? Is he come? Wouldn't. You can talk to any manager in England who's Davy Moyes will tell you the same and all that. Get away with a game at West Ham, you get beat, or Everton, you get beat. Up here.
Mayhem.
I mean, you look at the number of players or managers we've interviewed over the years who have come from England, thinking they've come from a bigger club and they're going to, Kilmarnock or Hibs or St Johnstone or Ross County, and they think they're coming up for an easy. And every single one of them will say the intensity up here, whether it's in a match situation, and that's teams that aren't expected to win every week, but they'll still say it's like nothing down. The passion, the intensity, the manager saying, like the number of press conference, just that constant need to deliver answers, even if you're not delivering points. They don't get that in other leagues. People up here maybe don't realise because they're living it, but we are an extremely passionate, really intense league, and it's a culture shock even for people coming from down south to here, let alone from the continent.
Players.
Yeah, that's it. Players,
I wonder. I wonder at this point, and I'm going to just brief on it because I've got a couple of things I want to ask you about before we finish. Maybe one of them we could actually dedicate a whole programme to, so I don't know why I'm going to try and jimmy it into the last 5 minutes of this programme. But just briefly on, we've discussed and looked at some of the results over the course of the Wednesday night fixtures, but suddenly it all goes towards Saturday and Sunday. And the big question, it's not so much that we're dissing Celtic, St Mirren, Dundee United, Aberdeen or Hibs, Rangers. Hibs deserve congratulations for finishing third. Aberdeen deserve tremendous criticism because, Jamie Tulleen, the light, the way and the truth, and I've had a few Dons fans giving me pelters for suggesting Malky Mackay and Neil Lennon way back at the start of the season, but they've had a monumental fall off, and I think the cup final is going to be a real test for Jimmy Tulleen because of the doing they got with Celtic the other night there. But the bottom six is the one where all the focus is on Ross County and what Dundee do at McDermott Park against St Johnstone. So briefly on that, before we get to the playoff one, where's your money going here?
It's still on Dundee. I think Dundee, if you look at them across the course of the season in isolation, who's the team that can produce the big result when they need it or against big teams and when the chips are down? It's been Dundee. They've not done it consistently enough, which is why they're in the position they're in. But I think if you were looking at a team out of, Ross County or Dundee to deliver when it mattered, I think I would back Dundee.
Yeah, I watched them.
They've got better players, better team.
Yeah, so I think the goal scorer is the key to this, and Simon Murray. I watched them against Ross County, and first half they were absolutely woeful, playing football from a bygone era, and then suddenly they just started to get it together in the second half and played some nice football, but they just seemed to shoot themselves in the foot, and I really do feel for them because I'll tell you one thing, Hugh, I wouldn't like to see at the weekend, if VAR gets involved again to the detriment of Tony Docherty. He never came into the press conference. He was absolutely fuming with the late penalty decision. And I hope there's no major decision that determines a club's fate.
Well, it's already, that's already a decision that sent St Johnstone down. And it's a decision that also puts Dundee in danger. Because if Dundee, if Dundee had won that, that was home and hosed, I agree. I think Dundee, apart from having that little minor 2-point cushion, I think, but also because Ross County have just been calamitous of late. There was a spell, this is how quickly Scottish football changes, but there was a spell where you thought, oh my goodness, remember when they were winning away from home? It seems like another season, they kept winning away from home. It's I wonder if they can get top six. But they've just went this, and we always say there's always a team that flies down without the parachute in Scottish football, and they're the ones, and I think they're the ones that will contest the playoff against Livingston.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I think we all share that view then. We're all in agreement, which we didn't start off in agreement. It's not bad, Moira.
Never like agreement,
absolutely. But I just cannot see past... I can't see past Livingston. I think Livingston will be able to see off Partick Thistle, but I still think with Davy Martindale and having watched Livingston on a few occasions this season, I still think they've got more than enough to beat Ross County.
I said that partway through the season when we thought it was going to be Falkirk romping away with the championship. Obviously, it didn't quite transpire that way. That wasn't as easy as we thought. But I said that at the time. I said I think Livingston will finish second, and I think whoever finishes that second bottom will have a really tough time with it. And I think that Livingston, they've got a good mix of youth and really experienced guys that can get them over the line. Again, they can dig in when they need to. They have a bit of variety to their play, but they also, if they need to just roll up sleeves, they're willing to do it. There's dogged players in there as well, and then the manager David Martindale. I think he's underestimated at times, Davy Martindale. I think he's a good manager who gets a lot from his players, especially in these one-off or 2-tier games. He can motivate for that, whether it's through fear or whether it's through bigging them up. But either way, he gets a reaction from his players.
I'd love to see him say, "Listen, Davy, you'll never believe this. Tony Bloom is invested in Livingston, and
he's picking your players.
Here is the blueprint for the players." Davy, who's old school. What?
But I don't think wit would be his answer.
It'd be. I agree. Moise, I've watched Livingston. I thought Livingston, even when Falkirk ran away, I thought Livingston would win the league simply because they would catch Falkirk. Me wrong again. But I thought they would just get there. And I thought even it would go to the last couple of games and Livingston would just do it. Because I've watched Livingston quite a few times this season. Every time I've watched them, I've been impressed with them. Because just the way they set up, what they've got in their team as well. I think McGowan and Wilson are not championship players. I think they're at worst lower league Premiership, lower level Premiership at the worst, because they are very, very composed. They can play out for the back. They're technically good and they're experienced. They don't get into flaps, etc., etc. They're good. And as Moise says, there's bits of quality stripped through the team. There's a bit of depth because you can get substitutes like Andrew. I think Andrew Shinney's a terrific player, and he can come on as a sub now.
Yeah.
Stevie May, who can really press, etc., etc. He's coming on as a sub now. So they've got a bit of depth to them. They've got, I agree, they've got a top manager. I think he's a really good manager. And I would, if I was Ross County / or Dundee, and I'm sure both Don Cowie and Tony Docherty would know this, I'd be saying this is, this is a real test. Another thing, I watched Livingston the other night there, and they didn't look tired.
No.
This all looked tired.
Yeah. Well, we're about to find out if one of them is going to come on top. Listen, I'm going to mention this just as a teaser. We're not going to discuss it in any great depth here at all. Certainly not for 3.5 minutes to get your thoughts on it. But I'm just going to mention it and tease it, because 442 did the 100 greatest managers of all time.
And David Martindale was top, was he?
He was
Is that what you're saying?
just outside the 100.
It was analytics second.
Yeah. By the way, I'll tell you right now, in that top 10, nobody's doing analytics.
Exactly.
I've had a look at the boy. He's kept the ball up for 300, but he can't play, so we're not buying him. But I'm going to go through the list, and then we'll tease it and make it another programme. And Moira, God willing, you'll be here to give us your tuppence worth, and we can fall out over it. But the top 10, 100 managers of all time, in the order that they have them, okay?
Right.
So 10, Valery Lobanovsky, who obviously
the Dynamo Kiev.
They made a name after him for a chip from anything further out than 40 yards. I made that up, Moira, they didn't.
That's the shot you always play when you're playing football, isn't it? You try that 40 yards because you can't make it to the box anymore.
But Valery Lobanovsky's number 10, Ernst Happel, Helenio Herrera, Matt Busby, and then at number 6 is Arrigo Sacchi. And then it's Pep Guardiola at 5, Bill Shankly ahead of him at 4, Johan Cruyff is 3, Rinus Michels is 2, and Sir Alex Ferguson is 1. So that's them. And now, I always, and I'm not in any way dismissing out of hand how they came to their top 100 by committee or otherwise, but I certainly wouldn't have that top 10 in the order it's in, Hugh.
And I wouldn't, the idea that Johnstone's not in that top 10.
He's 30.
It's madness. Johnstone beat Helenio Herrero in a Champions League final. And Bill Shankly, who I've got nothing but the wondrous admiration for, didn't win a European Cup.
No, he won a UEFA Cup. Yeah.
So, I would say that another thing, the point I would make, I'd put Sacchi much higher than 6, but I have no problem with Alex Ferguson at 1.
Yeah, I would actually just, I know it's slightly biased on it, I would have Cruyff up above Michels. And the reason for that is this: Michels may well have been the pioneer. Cruyff, took the wheel on to another level, in my mind, and Guardiola takes it all off of Cruyff, But I think Cruyff and the strategy and his contribution, not only as a player but as a manager and as an ethos, took it onto another level again from what Michels did. I don't know.
I always find it really interesting with lists like this because you're managing different types of players. It's not just that it's different eras or, and you can argue that you still, the merits of each of them, you can still argue. But I think it's hard to, would Alex Ferguson now be able to manage a Manchester United dressing room where the kids wouldn't respond to, the hairdryer treatment the same way? Could he find a different way to manage to make that still work? Would other older managers be able to do that? Would Pep be able to do it in an era where he could give that hairdryer and it was, you didn't have the same, like the whole world was your oyster to pick players from, you were picking, you know. So I always find it quite interesting with managers to, when you're looking at, you know, it's always hard when it's players, but I think definitely with managers it's hard to compare and contrast them or pit them against each other.
I think impact's a big thing. Impact's a big thing. That's why I put Saki very hard. Saki was the first. I mean, we talk about pressing and etc. Saki was the man that did that, and Saki was also the man who came from very humble beginnings. You know, not a footballer, no football pedigree or that, to manage what I think was, in my view, the greatest club side of all time with the Maldinis and the Van Basten, and the whole team was excellent. And of course, he was a guy who was not a footballer. He always said, you know, when people said, you know, how can they listen to you and you've never played football? His quote was, "You don't have to be a horse to be a great jockey." That was his. And he was to, but to go back to the Steen thing as well, we were talking about impact. People forget how impactful 1967 was, because if Inter Milan, who were heavy favourites to win in '67, had won it, the Herrera way would have been the way of football, and that was Catenaccio.
Yeah.
Steen won it, and total football became the way. So after Steen won it, Feyenoord won it, Ajax won it, and total football came, because the Dutch people and everybody saw that you could win matches and you could be successful at a high level, pushing full bikes up, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, okay, we've run out of time, but I would say, just as one answer to your question on, you know, Sir Alex Ferguson, if you maybe put 20 years younger, and Sir Alex Ferguson was Sir Alex Ferguson, the man he was 20 years ago, managing the modern day footballers, I still think he would go on to win, because they would respond, because managers do give players the hairdryer treatment. They still get it. There's
But
still
he's so
that
smart, Ferguson, as well.
Absolutely.
Because Ferguson, they talk about the hairdryer, but do you think he gave the hairdryer to Cantona?
No, he didn't, and that's the thing. He was a brilliant manager, and that's where I think different eras. Sometimes you can just be a tactician, and that works because you're reinventing something. Sometimes it's about how you manage. And I think man manage is more important almost now, because I think younger generation don't respond the same
and
way
Ferguson,
as others did.
Ferguson won a European trophy, beating Bayern Munich and Real Madrid at Aberdeen. End of argument.
Yeah, okay, there you are. And that is a classic line from some journalists down through the years, when they actually just give you a definitive and say end of argument. That means I don't care what you say, shut up, let's move on. Are you having a chaser with your lager? And that's and it's the best way to finish this programme. I do hope you have enjoyed the programme, and if you do like what we're producing on the Journos, why not hit the subscribe button as well. We'd love to have you on board, and I can tell you, over the summer and beyond, on PLZ Soccer, there's bigger and better on the way as well, because we will bring you even more variety of programming, and the Journos will be throughout the summer. We'll be looking at things like the greatest ever manager and other features like that. So it will continue, and we'll give you your football fix. From Hugh MacDonald, from Moira Gordon, from myself, Peter Martin, thank you for listening and watching.